further ado, I'd like to kick off this month's topic and our featured guest today. This month's topic is all about providing special education and related services within virtual and hybrid learning environments. So from our speech therapists, our OTs, our school psychologists, everyone who seems like maybe sometimes they're left off of that main category or list, this month we dedicate it to you. And to help us navigate some of these considerations and these ideas, we've got our recurring guests, Dr. David Bateman and Dr. Sean Smith. And then we also have a great perspective from the field given to us today from Bailey Cates. So guests, we're glad to have you. Pat and team, thank you for joining and helping us moderate the chat. The chat is open and live, so you are more than welcome to drop in questions for our presenters or ideas in the chat as we go through the hour. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Dr. Bateman, are you kicking us off this month?
Yep.
Yay. Okay.
All right. All right. So thank you very much. Let me share my screen and then you kind of go from there and just double check. Sean, can you see this?
Yes, it's all good. Yes, and now it's full presentation mode. Yep.
All right, thanks. All right. So thank you very much. And we will hit on a variety of topics as we go through this. But the important part is that I'm just going to give a brief update. And I strongly encourage all individuals to reference and pay attention to the office hours that they hold as a part of this. Because, and I mean this literally, is you've heard me say this before, those of you who are recurring attendees of this, but think about our optimism and think about what our attitudes were towards COVID in June and how things have changed rather dramatically as a result of just the massive changes in this past fall. Some of your school districts have shut down. Many of your kids are in quarantine. Many of what's going on. I'm likely going to be entering quarantine myself because my son just texted me. My son who moved home 2 days ago said he was exposed and he's going to get tested right now. So it's my new normal as a part of this. And so it's a part of what we're doing. But when we were talking about this in June, it was that we thought about this is going to be over. So, but I just want to, I'm going to share two quick things as we talk about this. First thing, all right. The first thing is this is an interesting thing that I just want to share with you. This is a survey that just came out just I think a few days ago from the National Association of Secondary School Principals. And this is how principals' roles have changed. And this is an interesting part of this. And I share this with you because the principal's role is dramatic and very important. And many of you know that I work very closely with principals across the nation as a part of this and want to make sure that we understand that you see this, that principals talk about working harder. Well, yes, we're all working harder. It's not just principals. It's not just teachers. It's all the related services personnel that we're going to be highlighting throughout the course of the next 45 minutes. And this is that we're all working harder and we are all working in a consistent environment that we didn't typically sign up for. There's many of you as part of your training, as a part of the supports you had, as a part of the instruction you received when you're becoming certified for the role that you play. This is a very different role than we are expecting. I really, truly wish that we would all say that it's all going away. This is this, but I can't tell you. I can't say that. I can't promise this. We've been working on these virtual environments with you and talking about and trying to give you updates on now. If we're coming up close to on our second year now, this may be the new normal, and this may be something that we're going to have to pay attention to and have to address. But this is change. You can see how it's changed the principal's role. So one thing I want you to think about as we're talking about this, as we're addressing this. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about FAPE in a second, because I just want to come back to that, kind of ground us. But are we focusing on when we're talking about kids, when we're talking about services? Because those of you who aren't aware, I'm involved in a lot of lawsuits, haven't worked and talked about a lawsuit with a school district since about 11 o'clock this morning. So I'm on a break because I do have some emails I have to respond to. But we have to think about, are we focused on the right questions? What do we want for our children, our educators, and our schools? What is our current reality and who are the players? Our current reality is shifting. Our current reality is one that we need to pay attention to. And what do our children, educators, and schools need to be successful? So the one thing that I want to focus on is what can we do as a part of services for all that we can part of this. And what can we do to maximize the resources to support students, teachers, and schools? Now, for those who've seen me doing many of the legal presentations I do, you know I do not focus on maximizing student performance because that is not our legal obligation. What I want to focus on is maximizing the resources to support the students and the teachers and the schools as a part of that, because that's what we need to focus on as a part of this. Okay, keep that in mind. So first thing, and I'm just going to ground us this because the pandemic seems to be rearing its head yet again. It is what it is, and some of you hopefully had a great Thanksgiving. As you know, I'm in Carlisle, and I'm trying to see that I can see the blue skies as we speak. But I want to make sure we understand this. Just to ground everyone on this. Have the FAPE requirements changed during the pandemic? There's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer, no, the FAPE requirements have not changed. We are still obligated. We are still completely and totally obligated to ensure that all kids eligible for special education and related services receive a free, appropriate, and public education. And that's important. Now, what is interesting, and this is the long answer, you can see this here. Whereas the FAPE requirements have been unchanged, we still have this obligation. And we see many of the due process hearings kind of trickling up, and we're starting to see some of the cases hitting the circuits on this. And one of the other SSDVE features we're going to do in the next couple of months is I'm going to highlight some of the due process hearings and what has happened as a result of this. You can see that how we're providing FAPE has altered. The decision remains that students as a part of the IEP team. This is an IEP team decision. And many of you get the opportunity / wonderful experience to participate in these IEP teams, and that's what we got to focus on. Okay, so going from there. So the assessment. Now, I'm just grounding you on all this. This is nothing fancy. This is nothing you don't know, but I just want to remind people of this because this is for me. Many people come to me and say, what can I do to help with legally compliant IEPs? What can we do as a part of this? First, make sure that we have a really good assessment because it's the assessment of the child that drives everything. It is truly the assessment of the child that drives everything. And that's what just, so the present level statement. So when I do reviews of IEPs for litigation for districts, the first thing I go to is what is the present level statement? And that dictates the needs for not only for the special education, but also for the related services. And I have a question on that in a few minutes that we're going to talk about. But this is what dictates everything. And I can't drive this enough. But one thing that also, we need to think about this. We do the assessment. You can follow the arrows in the middle of this diagram here. The assessment drives the programming and the placement, not the label of the child. I don't really care so much about the label of the child. And many of the hearings I'm involved in, it's not a fighting issue for me. Just get the kid in the door, but then make sure we're providing appropriate programming for the kid and then monitoring the snot out of that. That's a phrase I use regularly. I'm not going to demonstrate that for you. I might if we get sicker in my house. So keep that in mind. All right. So just keep in mind this. All right. The next thing is basically the internal consistency of the IEP. Here. Present levels lead to ambitious, measurable goals, which lead to special ed and related services. And that's what we're going to be focusing on that. And so we need to rely on talk about this. But if the need doesn't require a goal, go directly to the services because we have to think about what are the services we're going to be providing as a part of this. But focus on the internal consistency of the IEP as a result of that. Okay. But just hit up on this, things like this. Okay. The IEP must enable the child to make progress. After all, the essential function of the IEP is to plan for pursuing academic and functional advancement, not just academics. And this is too often what we think about when the problem that trips up a lot of districts is we so focus on academics that we negate the functional performance of these kids. And what we need to think about as a part of this is ensuring that the functional performance of these kids, the social, the behavioral are also included and improved upon. And we need to focus on that, okay? So real quickly, just two real quick things before we get to the related services things is prerequisites. Just before this is this, and this goes across not only, excuse me, all special education teachers, but all related services individuals. Do not miss the small stuff like the names, the dates, and don't say dumb stuff. And it's like, don't say dumb stuff. And it's like, I got multiple examples of this, but things like this is don't say dumb stuff, things like this, but just be real careful about this. And so I do a lot of, when I'm in IEP meetings, and I only get to go to the contentious IEP meetings, I do a lot of kicking people under the tables. So just keep this in mind. So here's some examples of some dumb stuff, okay? So we don't offer extended school year services to any students. Therefore, ESY will not be discussion point of this IEP meeting. That's a dumb thing. Don't do that. And many of you will be making your ESY determinations in February. Don't say that. Second, the IDEA does not allow tutoring services. It could be the kid could need a tutoring service, things like this. We could do this. Kid could need special transportation. Keep this in mind, okay? Now, here's another one. This meeting shouldn't take long. Mr. Blank has the IEP ready. All you need to do is sign it. Please never, ever say that. Never, ever say these things. And next, I don't modify instruction. In my class, everyone is treated equally. Well, if everyone is treated equally, then we don't need a special education program for this kid. It'd be nice if everyone could do this. And I'll have to pass the question on the powers that be, determine if we're allowed to provide such and such related service. It is not the powers that be that make this determination. It is the IEP team sitting there reviewing the present levels that make these determinations. And that's what we're going to focus on. Okay. So how do we define, just lay the foundation for related services? This is special education. Okay. Special education designed to meet the unique needs of a student with a disability. Yeah, I got this. You got this. It's instruction. It can be a variety of things, variety of placements. Second, it's free. And I mean by free, at no cost to the parents. It's got to be at no cost to the parents and applies only to, doesn't include incidental fees such as field trip expenses. Yeah, that's important. But I want to emphasize that, okay? The next thing, it's got to be appropriate to the child. And I say appropriate to the child to ensure that the child, and say, what do we mean by appropriate? Okay. What is appropriate is determined on a case-by-case basis. It must meet the state standards. PDE does a really good job of informing us and keeping us informed of what their state standards are, but it also provided in conformity with the IEP. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I can't emphasize that we need to think about this. One thing that you have to think about is the IEP. When you are telling a parent that the child's going to get such and such related service, that you better surely provide that related service. Because I can't tell you how many times I review IEPs and they say that the child is supposed to get half hour of speech language services weekly, and they get it bi-weekly. What does bi-weekly really mean? I challenge you. Use the Google, type in the word bi-weekly for definition. And what you're going to get is you're going to get two very different definitions. You're going to get one that says twice a week and one that says every other week. So pay attention to it. So be real precise. Do not use the word bi-weekly when you talk about services for children. So because it doesn't provide clarity and it doesn't provide understanding of what exactly we're talking about this. Further, public education. I'm going to breeze through this real fast and get to the related services part. Right? Meet state standards, includes placements in private schools, but we need to make sure that FAPE is provided, okay? So keep that in mind as we talk about this. Now, the next thing is related, related services may be required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education. Now, the law has changed, the related services, yes, we need to make sure the kids benefit from this and ensure with this. But this is not a Pennsylvania thing. This is the formal definition of special education is special education and related services. It is not a Pennsylvania specific thing that we're being asked to provide here. This is a federal thing. And what I want to ensure that we are talking about this. In fact, it's formalized. Here are the federal regulations. Okay? You don't need to read this, but you can see this is the formal regulations. I mean, if you just go into the Google and type in section 300.34 IDEA, this is what you're going to pull up. And you can see it's this, I copied and pasted. This is no creativity on my part. This is what I have here is the variety of things that kids get. There is not a master list of all the different things that kids might get. I'm serious about this. Here's my non-exhaustive list of related services. This is non-exhaustive, all right? Because there are kids out there who need services. And these are kids who need this in order to benefit from education. And without these services, education may not be the one that will allow them to make progress in their curriculum. So what I emphasize this is an important part of what we're doing. Related services for some of these kids, they're not going to be able to benefit from school without this. Wait, there's more to a non-exhaustive list, okay? You can see. And one of the things we often think about is transportation. That is one of the more common ones. And for those of you who are having issues with transportation, especially in light of that case a few years ago in Elizabethtown, if you have issues and need a questionnaire relating to transportation, I have an appendix in a book that just came out on legally compliant IEPs that we field tested a transportation IEP questionnaire. that I did with Amelia Blanton, who now works in the New York School District, and we field tested this in multiple states. Please email me and I'll send you a copy of the transportation questionnaire, because we want to make sure that kids receive appropriate transportation services, because too often transportation is negated as a part of this. In fact, what I'll do is I'll email it to the Ethan, who's controlling this, and he can post that as a part of something that you guys can use. I shouldn't do this because it's part of a book, but hey, it'll benefit kids. But you can see this. But also, you're seeing increasing. If you watch the videos on the YouTube about relating to cochlear implants and how it magically makes kids' hearing perfect, we're not providing this. They may need special services as a result of this afterwards, but this is something that we need to pay attention to. The other thing is assistive technology as an assistance a part of this. We need to make sure we're doing really good evaluations to help determine whether kids need assistive technology, but not just evaluations on assistive technology, all right? So when I say about assistive technology is you need to make sure that the assistive technology you do provide for a child matches the need the child has. And and so not only matches, helps solve the problem, but not only we are providing instruction for the kid on how to use this assistive technology, and we're also providing instruction to the teachers and classroom aides who may be working with the child on how to use that assistive technology. But we're also, and this is the most important thing, if you learn nothing else in the next minute, learn this. This is the most important thing. Learn that if a child, you provide some form of assistive technology.
Or I'll be over there if you need me before, so.
If a child is providing some form of assistive technology, what you need to do is you need to monitor it and see if that solves the problem. Because too often we place these kids. I mean, there's a district that I'm working with, a rather large district, where if you become diagnosed with autism, you basically get an iPad, but we don't then determine, does this iPad provide any formal assistance to the child to help what's going on? Because there are some wonderful apps for the iPad that work for some kids. My daughter's working with kids and using ProLoQ as an app, and it works really well, but the kids need instruction on this. Do not just give a kid an assistive technology device. And it could be, we typically think of something with microchips, or there's other ways of doing assistive technology, but you have to think about this, is give them a device and then monitor whether that works. Check with the kid a week, 2, 3, 4 weeks later, as opposed to just place and pray that it works. Because too often we spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time getting these devices for these kids, and then we give them to the kids and then we don't monitor their effectiveness. Why is this important? Because we're trying to meet the child's needs. The same thing goes actually with some of these kids who get one-on-one aids. Monitor the aids and make sure that the aid or paraprofessional that we're providing to the child is actually providing assistance to the kid and providing supports. And that is actually helping address the child's needs, as opposed to just assuming that placing a body with this kid, if you can get one of these people to apply for your jobs, placing a body with some of these individuals will solve the problem. No, you need to monitor this, because too often we place an assistive technology device or place an aid with these kids, and then we do not monitor where we're going with this. And that too often is something that we need to stop. Make sure you learn it 3, 4, 5 weeks later, monitor what's going on. Because if you don't do this, what might happen is there might be a due process hearing, okay? And a due process hearing, and you can see this, okay? And I'm just gonna let you know, okay? Just let you know that I do a lot of witness preparation for due process hearings. And one of the things that I really like, and I mean this sincerely, and this is something that we need to raise the bar for everyone else. When I do witness preparation, and I'm doing witness preparation with a speech language pathologist, it is often very easy. Why? Because the speech language pathologist often has regular and frequent data about how their progress the child has made on specific goals. I've talked about progress monitoring in these sessions prior, and one of the things we need to include is increasing dramatically the amount of progress monitoring we're doing for everyone else, because that's what's posing some different problems. So the important point for today: when a student becomes eligible for special education, they are also eligible for related services. And I mean this. They are also eligible for related services, and they are the only ones who are eligible for related services. There are kids out there who may need related services, but if they're not eligible for special education, they're not going to get it. And they should, and so we have to make sure that these students receive the related services necessary to help about this, okay? But also about this, so keep that in mind. Second, the related services must be both educationally relevant and educationally necessary. we're just not going to just randomly assign kids to related services. We need to make sure that the related services we're providing are both educationally relevant and educationally necessary. This is important because some of these kids are pulled out frequently as a part of this. We need to make sure that what we're doing is providing them the supports necessary about this, okay? So here are some questions to ask when thinking about related services for kids and what we're doing as a part of this. We're going to get into virtual instruction on this in a few minutes, but these are the questions. Will the absence of the service interfere with the student's access or participation in their IEP? Could the proposed service be addressed appropriately by either the general or special education teacher? Has the student been benefiting without the service? Has the student made progress? Are they meeting their goals? Does the proposed service meet any undesirable or necessary gaps? And educational relevance exists when a proposed service can be explicitly linked with a component of the student's IEP, either access to or the progress in. So keep these questions as a part of this, okay? So keep that in mind as we talk about this and make sure that we have this and address this as a part of what we're providing for the kids. And last, before I turn it over to Bailey, morals. They are provided by school if and only if they are necessary for the student to have access to education and or participate in his or her educational program. This may seem strange, but we need to think about this. Again, it's not random. These kids need this, and this is an important part. And so what we need to emphasize is a part of this is ensuring that the kids can access the service and obtain the service. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Bailey, who's going to talk about what it's like working where she is. All right. So Bailey, okay, it's all yours.
Okay, let me share my slides real quick. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. My name is Bailey Cates, and I still am providing virtual speech and language therapy services. Just a little background about me. I am an SLP in the Blue Springs School District in Blue Springs, Missouri. I'm at an elementary school, and we have kindergarten through 5th grade students here. And then we also have our essential life skills specialized program here. Right now we have about 16 kids in that program, and we have 2 different classrooms. We have K through 2 and then a 3, 4, 5 room as well. In March of the 2020 school year, our district was completely virtual. We went on spring break and then we didn't come back to school after that. So we were kind of just thrown into it, and we kind of had to figure it out as a district. So moving on to that's end of that school year, coming back in August of 2020, students had the option to be virtual learners or in-person learners. We didn't do a hybrid method or anything. And then of my caseload, 19 of my students were virtual. And then currently this school year, students have the option to be virtual or in person still. And now I only have 2 virtual students on my caseload, and the rest are back in person. So that's a little bit of background about me. I'm just kind of sharing my experience with virtual services. I am by no means a professional. I was just thrown into this and I've kind of made the best of it. So I'm going to share some pros and some cons, and then as well as some different tips that I found useful when I was providing these different services. So first I have some pros. The first pro of providing these virtual services was definitely family involvement. I got to know my students on a completely different level, which was kind of cool just to see them in their natural home environment. Students were showing me their pets, their siblings, their rooms, all different things at home. And it was fun to see them interact in a different setting. In addition to this, it was awesome that parents were able to see what virtual or what speech and language therapy services actually looked like. You can explain it so much to a parent, but when they're actually seeing it, it's a completely different experience. Sometimes I got parents involved when kids were producing their sounds. They would give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if I couldn't hear the student quite well. saying their different sounds. So they gave me feedback with sound production. And then this also helped increase the carryover of different skills into the home environment as well. So that was another great thing. As far as family involvement with assistive technology, that was also an awesome thing. Parents were able to see how more to navigate the different assistive technology devices, or if students were using low-tech options as well. I had to teach the parents a lot of how to do it, but that definitely paid off in the long run. And now parents are using it more at home too. So that was wonderful. The second pro that I have is all the different therapy materials. Being thrown into this virtual speech therapy world forced me to be super creative. I utilize lots of different platforms, like Boom cards are one of my favorites, different games and videos to keep students involved. I then discovered how to share my screen, let students control the screen. I let them write, draw, click on different objects. Lots of different ways to keep them involved. And now, as I'm doing more in-person therapy, I utilize technology in so many different ways. So I feel like that's made me grow as a speech therapist and as an individual, just kind of broadening my horizon with therapy materials. And then to go along with that, just growth and appreciation. It's given me a completely different perspective. I have grown, my students have grown so much, and my students that are back in person, I feel like they don't take it for granted as much. They love the hugs and the high fives, and they kind of realize what it was like before, so they appreciate coming to school each day. Moving on to the different cons of virtual speech and language services. First, of course, is technology. Things go wrong, my Wi-Fi goes out, their Wi-Fi goes out. And I would say the biggest tip is to always have a backup, and then always have that parent contact information close in case things don't work out. Sometimes I would do stuff over the phone if the computer wasn't working correctly. So that was a con, but we had to make it work. The second is human touch. Not only was I not able to provide different physical cues and prompts, but those high fives, positive and concrete reinforcers were no longer possible. But going back to that parent involvement, parent training occurred, and that I kind of had to teach them how to give physical guidance or cues as needed. The third con is sensory needs. Therapy through a computer or a device relies heavily on sight and sound. So I had to be really creative and hone in on those senses rather than touch or other sensory needs that students had. And then the fourth con is nonverbal information, which is hard through a device as well. It's hard to pick up on through online. And if students utilized picture exchange or whatever type of assistive technology device, sometimes I couldn't see exactly what was happening. And were they reaching for certain things? I only had that limited view of the camera. Or did they change facial expressions? All of that nonverbal input. So those are some of the cons that I kind of pulled from technology. And then I have some different tips and tricks that I found useful when I was providing services. The first one is establishing routines and procedures. Just like you would do in-person therapy, those are so important in order to know, for students to know what is expected of them. This up here, visual up here, this is some basic expectations and routines that I expected my students to do. Be sitting with a quiet voice, watching eyes and listening ears. And I have a little song that goes along with that, so that would keep them engaged. I also expected for cameras to be on at all times, full participation. And one really hard thing is that kids were constantly trying to talk over each other. So we had to establish routines for that as well. My second tip is just that relationship piece, and that's important with all kids. Relationships with students and their families is such a staple, especially with virtual services. Personally connecting with them and giving them that positive specific feedback and definitely increased motivation throughout different therapy sessions. The third is scheduling. At the very beginning of virtual services, I was trying to pair kids with kids that they knew to try to make them more comfortable. But in the long run, I wish I would have scheduled kids that had very similar goals. It's so much more efficient that way, and you can get lots of repetitions of the sound or the skill that they're working on. So that's, in my opinion, that worked best for me. Another tip is adapting and experimenting with materials. Once I kind of figured out materials that I liked to use, I kept them all organized in one place on my computer, and then had them all in categories. That way it was easy to access. And if one plan wasn't working, then I had I had lots of different materials that I could pull from as well. Because like I said, technology doesn't always go the way you want it. So engagement and routines. I try to keep students engaged with lots of different materials, whether those be materials that I was physically holding up and showing them or showing through my document camera, or materials that I was sharing through the computer. And then everything that I do in person, I just tried to adapt it to be online. That includes visual schedules. I just have a little example down here. I always had a visual schedule for them to look to see what was coming next and what they could expect for the therapy session. Different token economy boards. I would ask parents if they could have different things available, that if a kid earned however many stars, or if they focused for however many minutes, then they could earn that. Or it could just be talking with me or a video, whatever they wanted to work for. So that increased that motivation a lot, that token economy system. And then just different visuals to keep them engaged as well. I tried to create that sense of routine, even if it was through the computer. And my last tip, which I struggle with, is just flexibility. When I wasn't used to providing services virtually, I got frustrated and I got overwhelmed. But I kind of had to accept the fact that I don't know all the answers and I'm learning, and plans definitely change. So just being flexible is a big thing. So that is all I have.
Great. I'm going to jump in here now. So I will start sharing. If Bailey, you could stop sharing your screen, I will share mine. Great. So hello, everybody. Sean Smith here from the University of Kansas. Welcome back to all those that have been with us in the past. And for those that haven't, welcome. Why am I here? I do a fair amount of work in online learning prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, and I guess continuing, because I guess we're still in the fourth wave I've been listening to. All right, so to piggyback on what David shared and what Bailey offered, turned to some awesome ideas. I wanted to kind of prioritize things in two different areas. But before I get into the priorities, I want to share and reinforce, and Ethan and Sarah can reinforce where these are. So for those of us trying to collect that informal, particularly informal data, but also some formal data, but I'm not talking about the Woodcock, et cetera. We're going to get to that. But some of that other assessment data that's critical in better understanding, not only as our related services are being provided, but also for our school psychologists or for those working with trying to better understand diagnosis as well as evaluation, we have a fair amount of resources over several sessions on formative assessments and overall how technology can facilitate assessments online or in the digital realm or however else, the blended, hybrid, et cetera. So we're not going to have time for that today. I just want to emphasize the fact that we have talked about those have been shared, and Ethan and Sarah can point us in the right direction for that. So I'm going to slow myself down. There's some things I want to cover, and I know we're well on our way, but I'm going to slow myself down. So first of all, folks, I want to piggyback on what Bailey was sharing. And priority number one to me is that supporting, engaging, empowering, whatever words we want to use, the adult in the home. And now, of course, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, guardian. And Bailey mentioned, of course, some of that reinforcement. But, you know, I remember early on when the pandemic hit, and last year, a good portion of last year, the stories I was in, I'm very much connected with a number of parents. I'm a parent of a child with Down syndrome, so connected with parents, particularly of children with Down syndrome across the country. But then yesterday I was on a call with a parent of a child with ADHD and language processing. So just part of a parent network and constantly talking to parents, and several parents, and they to this day say this, you know, that screen, particularly for the related services. One mother I thought captured it so well in terms of thinking about how we engage, empower, and support. She shared that now she has two children with disabilities, one with Down syndrome, and autism, twice blessed. And one of them sees the screen as entertainment and continues to see the screen as entertainment. And so therefore, the therapy and how they planned for that had to take into that consideration to the entertainment component. The other one saw the screen as, well, that person's not real. And therefore that level of engagement and that belief in interacting with someone that as if they were there face to face with them. And for these individuals, of course, this daughter particularly, she had engaged with this individual face to face, and now she was fully online, and that lack of realism. I only mention those because to me, if I don't understand and I'm not connecting with and empowering the parent, I'm losing those elements. And my goodness, I could do all sorts of different things. I could take a list of things what Bailey's sharing and still be very, very limited. So to get started, I'm going to review a few things that we've shared in the past to be consistent, but also to kind of add on. So those of us who've been with me in the past, you'll see some similar resources, but I want to twist them a bit for our related service colleagues, right? So first of all, that idea that we really need to appreciate the adult in the home is that learning coach. And so therefore, I think part of our role, and Bailey touched upon this, and a lot of related service providers I interact with on a regular basis, reinforce the fact that part of their role, and something that, by the way, they were often not prepared for, directly at least, in some of the professional development as pre-service, related service teachers, et cetera, was this idea of empowering the parent to be that coach. Everything from overall development to the technology that Bailey was mentioning right from the get-go. She was doing a lot of problem solving with that, but also that master communicator. And so there's a number of different things that that learning coach in the online world has for us to learn from. And so if we think of our colleague at home, our partner at home, maybe colleague's a little too strong, our collaborator, the person that we're going to interact with. Yes, we can do a bit of a consultation model, but we need to empower them to be able to facilitate. And for those of us that have worked birth to 3 in the home environment with an IFSP, in a way, a lot of that is that. What are we doing to facilitate with the family member and engage the family member so that when we're not there, they're facilitating and supporting, et cetera, so much of what we're trying to introduce. And again, in the online environment, much of those same skills from that birth to 3 is what we're incorporating now 3 to 21. Now, for those of us that need to be a reminder about ways to interact and ways to empower and ways to support that learning coach, as well as what those roles could be, and as well as communication, et cetera, there's a great link here out of Connections Academy. They've been doing online learning for years, and they have some great resources on, hey, how to facilitate, how to develop, how to empower, how to communicate, how to allow a parent at home to know that they have that role of a learning coach. Now, you guys may call it different things. I'm simply going to refer to it oftentimes as it is referred to in that environment. All right. And of course, why should we communicate? Lots of different reasons. And of course, these are go beyond related service perspectives. These go for our educational perspectives as well. But a lot of it is to facilitate what we're trying to do. And I want to capture that here in just a moment, but I want to reinforce it. This is a slide I've used in the past. Just wanted to reinforce that. Now, there are resources out there, including the Peel Center, that have walked us through some of these dynamics and some of these interactions. And I want to, again, reinforce those are resources to go to better understand how to connect, how to interact, how to communicate, and of course, how to empower. And I want to reinforce that as well in just a moment. Now, there are other resources that have been created that aren't directly related to the related service types of facilitation, and yet they're great resources to think about that home school type of interaction. And so, yeah, not so much the IEP tip sheet, but information from this, there's a lot of different ideas about how to prepare for meetings, how to engage in meetings, how to share information for meetings, how to share resources related to meetings. Well, in a way, that's what we're doing in some of our related service sessions. We're meeting, engaging, interacting with the adult at the home. In addition, when we talk about communication for online instruction with the home coach, the home adult, et cetera, we are talking about making certain that we are providing as clear directions, expectations, et cetera, and we're empowering them with strategies, tips, ideas, tools, materials to facilitate. And we'll get to that here in just a second. Now, with that, many of us in education fully online have created a lot of materials when it comes to video for class instruction, right? We've done that for directions. We've done that where we've grabbed video out there with Khan Academy, and we've done a host of things. We're all become video technologists or videologists or whatever the name is, videographers over the last year and a half, and YouTube has become our friend. Now in therapy, there's some great resources out there. I've given one link here, but there's so many resources out there where speech and language pathologists, OTs, PTs, and others are sharing with us some great tips and ideas of how to use materials, how to use resources, how to use a home environment for those therapy reinforcements. So use those videos, yes, find those resources, but to me, equally important, use video as part of the session. Now, my son with Down syndrome actually received online speech and language therapy way prior to the pandemic, but due to the fact that his speech and language pathologist she had her first child, and they could not find a speech and language pathologist to work and cover the high school. So they did it remotely. And so often what we were doing was things that we have done prior, but we definitely utilized it during this experience. And of course, it's just an example of what's been used for the last 2 years. And that is, first of all, with video, why wouldn't we video, first of all, as a professional, a lot of what we're trying to facilitate, direct, repeat, illustrate, have the adult in the home further foster, be it an elementary school child, a preschool child, a middle school, high school child, or videos for the children themselves, where they illustrate what we're looking for. They offer what we're trying to do in terms of that positioning, in terms of what we're looking for that finer gross motor, in terms of how we're holding the tongue or the mouth, et cetera. But equally important, why wouldn't we have the child record themselves? We did this countless times with our son, countless. He still receives speech, we're still doing it. We want to record when he's practicing. Why? So our therapist can review to determine, yes, that's what they should be doing for practicing. No, that's what the challenge is. But also for additional data on, yes, they have acquired that ability. Oh, they're still challenged in this area. How do we further pivot, further facilitate, et cetera? Use video for not only what we want to share as professionals, but also to allow the clients we're working with, the students we're working with, our consumers, to further clarify and share with us what they're challenged with or potentially how they're progressing. So I could go on and on all day with video because it's just so powerful. Oops, I got her started and I didn't want to, so here we go. And by the way, there's a lot of good information out there to using technology tools with video. A lot of tech tools out there, a lot of tech tips, a lot of ways to use screen recorders that we want to record what we're actually doing. So we're not actually recording separately, but we're actually, while we're doing the session, we're recording it, saving it, and then making it available. There's countless resources out there. I've given you some here for your consideration. Yes, for class instruction, but also for related services. And by the way, there's countless information out there resource-wise for audio and video, step-by-step recordings for educators to be able to then record for their purposes with the individuals they're serving. So utilize those, of course. And then there's countless podcasts out there for ways educators, yes, it for teachers, way educators can use audio and use video in their instruction, in the same idea in terms of not only the tools, how to use the tools, and of course, then how to facilitate recording directions, recording instruction, recording activities, things of that nature that I would have a library of to then share with the students I'm serving. And of course, if I offer an example to one and students have similar types of challenges, I would use that example countless times so to become not only effective, but also efficient. And by the way, there's a number of tools out there to communicate with parents, right? That parent-teacher communication, the teacher-parent communication of the adult in the home that we were talking about before. So I just want to list several resources there. For those of us who have been with us, I've shared these before, but there are countless resources here in terms of that interaction, which is key in that communication to not only prepare for this service, but to also facilitate the day or the time we have it, but also the time outside that we want them to continue to reinforce, et cetera. Things that we would normally ask for that classroom teacher to facilitate. But of course, if they're fully online, it's that adult in the home, that learning coach, who is our kind of classroom teacher support, so to speak. Now, of course, there's lots of different places out there to help us in terms of interacting with parents, guiding us with parents, facilitating that. There's strategies to engage parents remotely, lots of different tips there, from lots of different resources. So I can go on and on and on. There's a lot of different tools to facilitate and to consider there. I want to go back to the tools in just a moment, but a lot of different tools for communication and for that interaction, for the service. The list goes on there. All right, now, if you want to, feel free to add on to what I'm sharing here. Go ahead and chat away, share some resources. Tammy was offering some awesome resources when David was talking in respect to AT considerations and AT assessment. So feel free to chat away and share that, but I'm going to go on because I just have a couple more minutes. So number two to me are tips, resources, and considerations when we're thinking of these therapies, these teletherapies that we're offering across a spectrum of individuals as well as a spectrum of types of therapies. So number one for me would be the fact that we really need to think about, tips for consideration. So number one, we need to be a master of our technology. We really need to, and I know many of us are, but that reinforcement that the technology can be used in lots of different ways. Now, number two, think of what David is talking to us about, and that is we need to know the law. We need to know the legal requirements. We need to check in about how can we use these platforms? What can we share in what formats to via the platform, via the technology we're using? Where does it need to be housed? How do we use WebEx or Zoom, or et cetera, et cetera? So there's always those rules. The Director of Special Education, our other colleagues will facilitate that. But number one, in terms of if we are using Zoom or if we are using WebEx, let's become an expert on that. I have a hyperlink here in terms of all the different ins and out features with teaching with Zoom that would, to me, very much with telepracticing, any type of teletherapy, here's a list of 30 apps in terms of working with Google Classroom, but a number of these apps are associated with, if I'm using the LMS, and by the way, Google Classroom and Moodle are the primary LMSs used out there in our schools today. Why wouldn't we, in terms of Google Classroom, then try to incorporate some additional technologies that would foster and support what the child is doing with the classroom, with what we're doing with our tele-related therapies that would interconnect, generalize for the student and for the adult in the home, instead of using something totally separate or an add-on. The other thing is that back to number three, we talked about this for the good first 10 minutes of this, and is how do we manage that relationship? And I added in the facilitator coach because we are going to ask a lot of the adult in the home. We're going to ask them for material setup. We're going to ask them to get the materials out. We're going to ask them to prep. We're going to ask them to potentially reteach and practice and explicit instruction, et cetera, afterwards. Scheduling and more scheduling, right? What materials are you using to that? How are you organizing that? We know in terms of how we need to provide our therapy and how we need to provide the service and how it's identified on the IEP. That scheduling component that David touched upon is really critical in terms of where are we allocating and when are we providing those services and when are we not, based on when we're online and how we're doing it. The offline work, what does that count for or can it count for? But it's that scheduling component and using the various technology tools to make certain that we can maximize the time that we're online and in a way benefit that, because now we're not getting in our cars and driving to and from, which is opening up some options there, but back to scheduling. To me, what digital tools are you using to go back to communicate, schedule that? All right, the assessments, are we doing it right? There's so many available tools. I made reference to some conversations we've had on this in the past. Please go back to look at some of those and utilize those assessment tools that are available. And again, I urge us to think about tools we're already using in the classroom that we can further expand upon, like, for example, video and audio and things of that nature to collect some of that information. And as Bailey said, be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared for, what we can't. I'll just leave it there. Really, really critical. All right, a few other things in terms of some resources. There's simple activities we can send home. And again, how do we send it home? How do we organize that? Yeah, we could send a weekly or monthly email, but maybe we put it into the LMS and we organize it in a certain way. So part of the therapy, and I've seen too many sessions here where part of the therapy is, now remember I sent it this way, did you print it out? I wanted it in this manner. Oh, it was color coded. So we're not sending to 35 of our students on a weekly basis these materials. So how are we organizing that? What are we suggesting if it's not Play-Doh, something else? How are we creating that list? How are we making certain that we're not spending most of our therapy trying to deal with the materials and resources? So we're being proactive ahead of time. And of course, working with the parents, as we mentioned earlier, brainstorming. We can always use different technologies to check in, and a list of things goes on. And I mentioned that pre-recorded video earlier. I'll let you look at this at your leisure in terms of 10 steps to make teletherapy work. Of course, it goes across related services, but I'll let you guys look at that at your leisure in terms of connections. Now, please, as many of you already do, use professional resources. I know many of you, for those speech and language, you're familiar with the fact that ASHA came out because ASHA is king or queen, or ASHA is in control of your lives. I don't know how speech and language pathologists think of it, but they're very directive, right? But they've offered some really good information on telepracticing. Everything from guidelines to checklists to ways to collect data to guidelines for school-based professionals, and a list of things goes on. And so we know that a lot of, in certain areas, certain rural areas, including Pennsylvania, definitely out here in the Midwest, teletherapy through speech and language was being provided prior to the pandemic. And so ASHA was on top of this, but they've revised and updated. And I gave you the direct links. It's a bit messy, but just in case it's not working, you have it there to type out. Okay, so there's other organizations as well for our school psychologists and those that are dealing with overall testing, diagnosis, therapy in terms of psychologists. The APA has come out with a number of different guidelines and practices, as well as the National Association of School Psychologists in terms of considerations for delivery. I typed in for delivery, typed there twice there. Sorry about that, but those are great resources. And by the way, this is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of other organizations that are offering this type of information. So my reinforcement is go to those professional resources, those professional organizations. But there's some great teachers out there, great therapists out there, great educators out there offering some excellent resources. So this is one off the OT toolbox. Everything from understanding teletherapy from that perspective to, oh my goodness, teletherapy slides that are organized per month. Awesome in terms of resources to use. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Again, so many different resources out there to identify, find, and then utilize. Now, finally, I want to end with this, and that is we need to understand that there are some entities out there that have been doing this, and maybe some of you are already partnering with them because some of your services are being provided due to this. So I know in Pennsylvania, some of the virtual schools have utilized presence learning for several years, as well as global therapy, which I think global therapy now is under the arm of presence learning, even though presence is its own entity and global therapy looks like its own entity. I think they're one and the same. But they've offered some great resources. They have a library of resources about how to facilitate some of the therapies we're going to offer. So they offer themselves. Presence learning, by the way, is the one that employed the speech and language pathologist for my son several years ago. A good portion of our rural districts here in the state of Kansas, due to the fact that they can't get speech and language pathologists, they'll contract with Presence Learning, just like a lot of your virtual schools there in the state, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania do as well. So they've offered resources, they've created resources, so places to go there about guides, checklists, considerations to learn about to further improve your practice. I've run out of time. I hope what I've offered, the few tidbits and resources, are something that you guys can go back and reflect on and further enhance what Bailey and David were sharing as well. So I'm going to stop sharing and give it back to Ethan and Sarah to bring us home.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you to our presenters, Dr. Bayman, Bailey, and Dr. Smith, for sharing so many great resource considerations and strategies. Again, this hour really flies by so quickly. As mentioned, the slides, all our presenter slides and their resource or the links are now available in our share notes doc. And a recording of this workshop will be posted in the share notes doc as well shortly. So if you navigate to our share notes doc, which I'm going to show you, you can see, scroll down to December, and you can see the slides are here, the files are here. And recording will be available and posted here. And of course, you can find additional resources and other opportunities here. There are a lot of great resources and opportunities. So please check them out in our share notes doc and also in our Schoology. As we wrap up for this hour, let me just go back to the slides. Please make sure that you submit your attendance for F48 credits or for ASHA credits. Whether you do it at this moment or you need to run out the door, I know it's already 4, please take notes of that link for attendance. We leave our attendance for open until midnight. So you can use the link on the slides, the tiny URL, or you can use the QR code. I'm going to drop the full link in the chat window as well. Here. So the full link right now is in the chat. So you can use all these different methods. They all go to the same form. So make sure that you submit your attendance by midnight tonight. And as mentioned, we do have virtual office hour. This month is scheduled on December 14, 3 to 4. Our next session is scheduled for January 13, 3 to 4. That session will focus on delivery model, options, and outcome. And we are so excited to announce that the registration is now open and live at Pattern website. So you can find all the information in our share notes doc. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and thank you for our presenters. Yeah, okay, thank you. So so we are all, if you are ready, feel free to log off, and then thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.